and I'm here to talk to Elijah, who is the only person I'm endorsing this entire primary season, because I'm careful about who I put my name with after previous bad experiences, and there's no one I believe in more than Elijah. So, Elijah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. Well, it's good to see you, Rebecca. We go back. I think it's like, yeah, about 5 years or so. Oh my God, the way time just goes. Like, they slow down a little bit. I'm getting old. The wrinkles are starting to come in at 27. But I'm glad to be here. Yes, running for Congress down in Broward County. Broward County, the blue dot in Florida. But although it's blue, it has a lot of problems and needs some fixing. So that's why I got into the race for Congress. And this congressional race has gone through several eras. I mean, you had the first era where I was going up against Sheila McCormick, and the second era when she got indicted, and it looked like it was a done deal. And then the third era, redistricting, and then the fourth era being thrown into a race with a former DNC chair. And so it's been, you know, you're running full speed towards Congress, and out of nowhere, you're up against somebody with $3 million and who was a former chair of the DNC. But nonetheless, I got in a race because we have a crisis with affordability, with corruption in our government, and it's not the same old thing. Is not going to work. I'm a middle school teacher during the day, so I deal with students yelling at me, and so I am used to seeing children yell at me, and I'm getting prepared and ready for the children at Capitol Hill yelling at each other. But I'm coming in there with that organizer mentality, with that educator mentality, but also the mentality of somebody with lived experience who's gone through some things in life. I talk quite a bit about my background in 2008, the financial crisis, how that hit my family, how we were homeless as a result of that, and how I turned that pain into purpose, into fighting for an economy that works for everybody. And now I'm, on the front lines of this fight now because never have we needed it before than we do it right now with a Democratic Party that's lost its way and with a government that is attacking its people.
Yeah. And going back, this interview will probably seem a lot less, I don't want to say uptight than I normally am, but maybe a little less businessy because I know Elijah. For those of you who don't know, Elijah actually came over to the Panhandle and like stayed with me and like watched my campaign and went to events with me and seeing you campaign with very much the same kind of like just deal with the issues approach that I was trying to run with has made me so proud. I feel like a proud mama. But when I met Elijah, he was one of the youngest activists in the state. Was one of the very few people at that time who could say that they sued DeSantis and won. And you're only 25 or 6 now, right?
27, 27.
Oh my God, you're already 27. I feel like when I see people's children, that's what I ask, because I just disappeared for years. So you were only like 22 or 3 when we first met.
Yep.
And Elijah has been through the things that he's trying to fix. And it, of course, it's my personal opinion that living those experiences will always make a person understand the nuances of them better than someone who, even if they're well intentioned, has never been in that position. And really the contrast between your opponent, the former DNC chair, and you and your district couldn't be more dramatic. And I'm proud of him. I'm very proud. And I think seriously, I support some candidates over some other candidates across the country. I've done a lot of interviews. I've interviewed Abdul El Sayed, Bita, who's running in Virginia's first, Oliver Larkin, who's running in the district near to you against Jared Moskowitz, a couple of other people, and I support them. But like I would put my whole reputation, heart, and soul in for Elijah. Which brings me to my first question, which is something that is almost never asked in a congressional campaign because it's never really a big issue until, you're one of those people. But during National Whistleblower Day, which was yesterday, I found out that I lost my appeal with the state on my case, which has been ongoing for 6 years. And while they did not even examine the merits of the case, they just straight up said, like, the merits of this case are immaterial to why we are doing this. They said that it's not illegal to fire on because they're going to file a whistleblower complaint. It's only illegal if you fire them after. So the timeline of events for me was Friday afternoon. At the end of the day, I had a long conversation, and there were text messages in which I told him I was going to file this complaint, saying I'm going to file a whistleblower complaint. Friday night, we learned through depositions, all of my higher bosses met and decided to fire me that night. And they fired me Monday before I could go and file a complaint. And the court has ruled that the statute doesn't forbid them from firing someone who they know is about to file a complaint, which as a state employee, you won't be able to enforce protections. We're a completely different system, which is terrible, but it's true. But it is so unsafe for state employees to, if you don't know how to file a whistleblower complaint. When they hired me, I was like 28 years old. That's not like one of the policies that you really pay attention to when you're just getting hired somewhere. It's like, oh, I better make sure I understand the whistleblower complaint process, you know? So you can't ask anybody about it because then they can fire you and it's totally fine as long as you haven't done it yet. It means that if you are a witness to something in the workspace that is a civil or even criminal infraction, they can fire you for witnessing it, even if you haven't filed anything, which is absolutely horrendous. And that means there's no, recourse for whistleblowers, especially in, life or death situations. We're obviously appealing up. We're not done yet. We want, I think, the state Supreme Court to actually say whether or not it's perfectly legal to fire someone if the next day they come into work, they're going to file a complaint.
Yes.
Yeah, because that's horrible. And so my question for you is the whistleblower protections that we have now are for federal employees and contractors, which obviously doesn't cover state, local, and private companies are covered as well. But they're still at that federal level wholly inadequate. What would you do to be a champion for whistleblowers when you're in Congress?
Well, the first thing is I think a lot of the laws are inadequate as they stand, and the Trump administration having control over these protections or how they are enforced has proven to be not good. I talked to a lot of federal workers and a lot of people, they don't know where to go. Because like you said, it's similarly on the federal level, people who, they have complaints or they're about to file a complaint or fired, whether it's workers at the FBI or workers at Social Security Administration or at other federal agencies, or you had DOJ come in and kind of get rid of almost every office of ethics or government review or whistleblower office, basically gutted the funding, gutted the staffing, and now anybody that's trying to whistleblow, or they call it leaking, they are like using the full weight of the government to track these people down and not just fire them but arrest them. So Congress has to do something about that. I think we need to take another look at the act, do some amending, and I think taking these whistleblower protection agencies out of the chain of command for the president and making them independent agencies that only answer specifically to Congress, and without the president having the full power to appoint people. Because what we see now is he could just go in and say, well, I'm going to fire everybody and put my people in and pretend like it's a legitimate system. So that definitely has to change. And then the law needs to cover state and local as well. I don't understand why it doesn't. The federal government has has complete power through the supremacy clause to, enact the law for whistleblower protections that cover state and local jurisdictions. And we should amend and make that happen.
Yeah. And there's also a lot of people don't know this. They think they have OSHA protections no matter where they are, but a state has to decide to opt into OSHA for those laws and protections to apply to you. And Florida is one of the states that does not. What is the point of having a department that is supposed to oversee worker safety if an entire state can be like, nah, we don't want to do that?
I'm so glad you brought that up. So in 2024, I had a great privilege to be a fellow at OSHA in a labor department, in one of the divisions that specifically focuses on like enforcement and on programs. And I worked on youth safety programs, youth workers, and on heat protections. And Florida was one of the states that said we don't want no heat protections for workers. But a lot of these entities get away with violating the law, whether it's workplace safety laws or whistleblower protections, because okay, you get fined $17,000 or $7,000 or whatever. If you're a giant corporation, you're just like, okay, I'll just pay it, whatever. If you're a government institution, you likely just get away with it anyways because of the politics. So the Labor Department has been essentially gutted and weakened by corporations and by the Republicans, obviously, and do nothing Democrats. So in my platform, I call specifically for a workplace safety prosecutor within the Department of Labor, not in the Justice Department, because we see how that can be an issue. So, independent prosecutor within the Labor Department with the same powers as the Justice Department, not just referring it, because oftentimes these cases get referred to the Justice Department where they die or nothing happens, or, we need somebody that's able within the Labor Department to say, I'm prosecuting this case. I'm arresting these people. I'm subpoenaing these records. I don't have to go to the Justice Department and wait for a cabinet secretary or somebody to say yes, or some, mid-level bureaucrat to say, ask the politicians if it's okay. We need somebody that's able to act like that and take people to court, subpoena records, do it full-scale investigations with full enforcement powers, and increase these fines as well. And then when it comes to the government as well, they need to have the same amount of power to do the same thing, and not just from the Justice Department. DOL should be able to go in and say, okay, well, this is what the state of Florida is doing. This is why it's wrong. This is why it violates the law. Forget a fine where we're taking people to court and we're going to have them remedy this act, or it's a criminal sanction.
Yeah. And that is a lot of that is policies that people who work in the labor um realm have been pushing for a long time. And there's also a whole whistleblower aspect to OSHA complaints too, and retaliation for speaking out. And something I saw when I was with AmeriCorps is that oftentimes the people who are put in the most dangerous situations, their legal status is either temporary or processing or not documented yet. And they take advantage of those people because they know they're vulnerable. And if they report anything, they're deported. And so there's no protection for whistleblowers who make OSHA complaints from being deported. And then once somebody's deported, the complaint just magically disappears. And that's really a travesty because people do risk their careers, their safety, their lives to expose bad people. And they shouldn't be afraid of their entire life being destroyed if they do, speaking from experience. But no, I agree with all that. So my next question, because I am a climate scientist and I do focus a lot of that here, is what kind of measures are you interested in exploring or policies that you're supporting to combat not just environmental degradation, but climate change on a global scale?
Yeah, another question that's never really asked anymore, and I'm surprised because I'm running for Congress in South Florida, and this is not an issue that I'm asked in any debate ever or by any news outlet about climate change, which I think is like one of the most defining threats for South Florida. Sea level rise, saltwater intrusion, things that we should care about as a region in South Florida that just doesn't get talked about. And the state has a lot of power to do a lot, and they just choose not to. But federally, there's some things we can do. I think, one, we have to move away from fossil fuels. I know that's going to be tough to get through Congress, but we should still fight for things even if they're hard. And I tell my Democratic friends and colleagues that are running, a lot of them will say, well, a lot of this won't get passed, even with the majority. And I'm saying, well, Republicans never take the attitude of we can't do it because we don't have the votes. They advocate and they fight for the things that they want, no matter what, until they get it. And that's what we should do. We should move away from fossil fuels to clean and renewable energy ASAP. We should also address the issue of saltwater intrusion. I know in South Florida, we get all of our drinking water supply from the Biscayne Aquifer, and I know there's been, some corporate degradation happening there with FPL wanting to inject their waste fracking water onto there, other attacks. We have to address that. But this is also bigger than that, bigger than just the fossil fuel energy. It's also about making sure that people in different communities have access to the clean and renewable energy, whether it's solar, without it being monopolized by an energy company. I think that's going to be extremely important. And how quickly we scale up. I think we need to move, if it's solar, there's a debate about nuclear, all types of different energy sources that we should just be looking at to move away from fossil fuels. And also making sure that we're providing no subsidies to the polluters, no subsidies to the oil companies and the polluters and the chemical companies that are polluting our waterways, and that are destroying our environment. So those are a couple things that I think we need to do, but it has to be like a World War III type mobilization, in my opinion, because this is literally like a threat to humanity. And the fact that this is not getting the attention that it deserves from Congress, we all know why. We know it's because people are bought and paid for by the people they're supposed to be regulating, but also restoring the EPA. The EPA has been gutted to shreds by this administration. Some Democrats are happy about it too because they get paid by the same people. We need to restore the EPA, give it more power to enforce our environmental regulations, protect federal lands. Um, that has to be what we do. And the federal government is one of the largest emitters of carbon emissions on the planet through the military, and through our large scale operations, our logistical operations. The United States government, the military, largest emitter of carbon emissions that we know of, and then we know China does a lot of it as well. We don't know all of it, but we have to cut back on that. And I think we need to move our government to zero carbon emissions. We need to lead by example. So moving the government first, because it's great to go to the private sector and say do this, but the government needs to lead by example. And we need to rejoin the Paris Climate Accords. We need to go a lot further than the Paris Climate Accords, but we should start where where we were at least.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. No, we've taken quite a few steps backwards, and steps that were very hard fought in baby steps to begin with the Paris Accord, which was very much seen as a watered down version of what we needed, but it was the thing we could get everyone to agree on. And that's better than, what happened in Kyoto, which the United States decided they weren't going to sign it. And so everybody else was like, if the biggest polluter in the world doesn't have to sign it, why should we, make these sacrifices while they just continue to business as usual? But Paris accounted for a lot of that. It took a lot of negotiation. And so re entering that again would be important. But you mentioned water resources in the context of saltwater intrusion. What about AI sorry. What about AI data centers, which are consuming pretty significant quantities of water? They're building in a lot of fragile environments, and they're building very quickly. Oftentimes, they're getting tax exemption. I believe Texas just made all data centers tax exempt, which makes absolutely zero sense. So what is your take, not just on the expansion of data centers and the resources that they use, but also more broadly AI governance?
Yeah, so I have a pretty lengthy AI safety platform. The first thing I'll say on the data centers, while I think innovation is always necessary because we do need the data centers, obviously, I'm very concerned by the rate of expansion of them. Like especially here in Florida, like they tried with Project Tango and Palm Beach. My concern is obviously the resources they're using, how that's going to affect the utility rates of working class people. They should be paying for their own utility rates, and they should be using their own water, not the public's water, not using all of our resources to power their essentially their power plant. And while we need the data centers, we don't need the pollution. We don't need the radiation that is being caused in certain communities where you have people getting cancer. The noise pollution, the pollution of our waterways, the usage of public utilities causing our utility rates to skyrocket. That is all an issue. But AI as a whole, while there's a lot of promise with healthcare. There's a lot of promise with the innovation that is going to cause. There's also a lot of threat to our civil rights, to the labor, to workers in workforce, and to human safety. Because now you have these models that they're capable of creating biological and chemical weapons, or they're very close to it. And we just saw the other day that there was one company's model was able to basically ignore human oversight and essentially hack. I believe it was banks or something I saw yesterday. That's quite frightening to me. And so there needs to be regulation. Regulation solves this. There needs to be testing of these models before they're released to the public. Just like you can't just build any plane and let it fly off the tarmac and into the air. It needs to go through several layers of safety and testing before that fleet is allowed to, or that model of plane is allowed to fly in the air. We need to do the same thing with a technology that can, you know, bring a lot of good to the public, but also destroy human lives or civilization, put people out of work. And so I call for a tax, a token tax, to make sure that when these AI companies are putting people out of work, people are getting paid. Um, Data privacy protections for people because AI is scraping all of our public data, our face. So it's surveillance. That's also what gets you to me, whether it's the flock cameras, whether it's how AI is taking all of that data, scraping it, and using it, letting corporations and the public use it. That's a concern to me because I didn't consent to my data being used by AI. And so we should either be paid or we need stronger data protection laws, a big overhaul in general, not just for AI, but data privacy laws need to be overhauled in its entirety. I think we need to deflock America. No more flock cameras. Definitely not on every public road. It makes sense on a highway because it's collecting all of that data and then it's being sent to Department of Homeland Security and who God knows where else. And they're putting it through Palantir or whatever AI
Mhm.
software that they're using, and they're surveilling Americans. And so we need to cut back on that. And I can go on and on and on about all the things we need to do about AI, but we need smart regulations. I mean, New York, they had some really good laws that the federal government can use as a model going forward to make sure that we're protecting the public and protecting workers.
Okay. Yeah. Um, I don't know how much time we didn't actually discuss how much time I had with you, so I won't drag you on too much. Um, I guess I mean those issues right now. It's almost shocking that are not being discussed. Like climate change is not being discussed. AI, despite the fact that right now there is overwhelming bipartisan opposition across the entire country to the rate of expansion of data centers, no one's talking about it. And so, that's why I like to ask about these things because they're issues that everyday people care about and no one's asking. You live in Florida, you should care about climate change, and hurricanes and FEMA disaster preparation and response, which has also been almost entirely privatized. And, thankfully, so far, knock on wood, we haven't had, a major category 5 landfall this season. I need actual wood. This is my desk is like carbon fiber or something. But, I'm gonna have to find some wood, knock on it, yeah, after that because, yeah, we're not even at the peak of season yet. The peak of hurricane season is overflows from, like, August 29th to, like, September, 5th, so we're not even done with that, and I like to have that because, anybody can go online and see a video of you talking about healthcare or, income disparity, but we're not having real conversations that I think everyday people want to see us have. Um, Speaking of those general issues though, which of those kind of more in the conversation topics right now do you think is most important to tackle when you're elected? It could be like healthcare or finance or whatever.
It's hard to pick one as the most important, but I do think that, you know, the AI is going to really affect everything. Um, Healthcare, yes, I can say healthcare, I can say housing, I can say the buzzword affordability, like every Democrat, and they all just say the buzzword. And you don't know what it is they're actually saying. Like affordability. It's like, okay, what do you mean about affordability? But I think AI, because honestly, it's going to change everything. People are going to be put out of work. Sam Altman is saying it himself, this live for everyone to hear. People are going to be put out of work. And what guardrails do we have in place for this technology? When people are put out of work, what is going to happen? Are we going to have a UBI situation? Are we going to guarantee healthcare to everybody and some form of housing when AI puts people out of work? Like, what are we going to do?
Mhm.
It's going to affect our national security. We have now cyber wars being in AI being used to end, for proxy wars. It's going to affect the banking sector. Hackers are now using artificial intelligence to do things. It's going to affect our democracy. People can create really compelling videos of candidates saying things they didn't say. People are using AI now to create really horrible videos of people and committing sex crimes. I mean, this is something that's going to impact the country, our environment, everything in every single direction. And if we don't tackle it as a Congress, we will not have a country. And
Yeah,
so
we
I
don't
think
really have a great AI plan, if anything, right now. One of the bills that my community and the whistleblower community are trying to push very hard is the AI whistleblower protection bill. And that is because we have had at least two AI whistleblowers commit suicide um, following disclosures that they had made or tried to make. And unfortunately, suicide is very common among whistleblowers, but it's when there's no actual structure for you to do something like that, to whistleblow an AI, it becomes very difficult to navigate an already difficult system. But yeah, and I was also going to add that by 2030, AI data centers are expected to consume 30%, 30 to 35% of all electricity in the United States. 30 to 35% just data centers in the United States. That's a looming disaster that we need to deal with. And also the fact that, we're building all these data centers that are supporting, in some cases, critical models and information that are relevant to the medical field. And they're not necessarily being built very well because they're more concerned with being built quickly. And if you're building in places, let's say like Florida, and a hurricane comes along, there's a question of capacity and how much we're going to lose if things start to be destroyed, which is
And
what
that's
nature
the
wants to do.
and that's the difficult part about it because all this is complicated. It's like obviously you need the data centers and it's for like the medical infrastructure and technology, but also it it has to be regulated and it cannot be expanded at a way. So it's finding like a way to do things that make sense because we need it. Like just like we need food, but we also don't need chemicals in all of our food. So it's finding a way to like to do
Balance.
things that make and balance it because you got some people that'll say complete moratorium, which I understand why people will want a complete moratorium. I'm not going to be someone that says, "Oh, you're horrible." I understand why people want a complete moratorium on the data centers. Obviously, that can't happen because all of our infrastructure will collapse. But we cannot let the companies, the data companies, the AI companies, just run free and just say we're going to build data centers everywhere all the time and with no regulation and let them just do whatever they want. That can't be the way. And so if you're going to be in business, like you're going to be regulated. And we need a regulatory state that is strong, and we need federal agencies that are strong. And they have succeeded through Project 2025 and over the course of decades of gutting the federal regulatory state, the administrative state. They've gutted it. They put lobbyists in charge of all the agencies. They fire the whistleblowers. They fire the people who have the expertise. They put in, people who are going to do the bidding of the corporations. And then when Democrats get in, we don't do the same thing, and we don't remove the bad actors. We don't get rid of the the lobbyists or the horrible people that they put in place. And so we have to start building our own version of Project 2025 so that we get back in, we clean it up, and we change it. And Congress needs to codify things to make sure that we have a government that works.
Yeah, I really appreciate your nuanced view because a couple of the people I interviewed were like, "Yeah, moratorium," and I think that's unrealistic. Um, we don't. I'm. People say we don't need AI. All AI is evil, but we're never in public conversation talking about the benefits of some AI systems, particularly in the medical field. And it's not as black and white as all AI is evil. It's like it has, yes, it can be used for evil, but, so can cars. That's why we regulate, inspect. We only license people who are, allowed, have proven that they can handle it safely. So AI is going to continue to expand whether we want it to or not. Just pretending, like closing our ears and thinking if we just pause construction on facilities, that will somehow change what AI is not real. That's can't happen. You're talking about the physical infrastructure, not governance of how that industry even works. But you mentioned something too about the lobbyists. Sorry, I gotta let my dog out of the room. You've met Khaleesi, my husky. She's still around. She's 14 years old now.
Mhm.
Yeah, the
Oh my,
husky you met when at my house, she's 14 years old now. She's still, and she goes woo woo woo. So I don't want to interrupt us. But you mentioned lobbyists and people who are being paid off, and I think that is one of the issues that I've seen you really discuss a lot is about getting corporate interests out of campaign finance. Doing more to hold people accountable for bribery on the Supreme Court and in Congress and stock trading. So, do you want to talk a little bit about what you're planning to do to combat the kind of just the purchasing of Congress?
yeah, so we need an overhaul of all the ethics laws. and actual enforcement mechanisms of them as well, because the stock trading is like one of the most cartoonish public examples of it as well. But people get very creative. It's the stock trading. It's now the trading on the betting sites. You even got candidates trading for or against themselves in elections. Wow, you had a couple candidates that got caught doing it and then got fined. Say we're on Polymarket or Kalshi betting for or against themselves, which is like any indicator that is not a good thing, and it's very hard to track a lot of it as well. You also have politicians that are paying you know staff and cutting deals. It's all types of craziness. So we need code of ethics for both Congress, banning stock trading entirely for members of Congress. We also need a code of ethics that is enforceable for the Supreme Court. After we back the Supreme Court too, we need to make sure that we have a code of ethics that they're following, and remove the judges when they're not following it, and for cabinet secretaries too. And then we have to find a way, in my opinion, to leverage the federal power to make sure that people are following the law in courts, or what the courts say, because now we're in a dangerous era where you have an administration that feels like they don't have to follow what the court says. Because if you have the people that are supposed to be enforcing the law saying, we don't care what the court says, then you have lawlessness and anarchy. So we need to address that. But we have a state that is filled with, this government is filled with just lobbyists running the show, and nothing gets done as a result. So we need to end that revolving door. There a ban on members of Congress lobbying for a certain amount of time when they leave office. Take a waiting period. Listen, if it's 2 years, if it's 5 years, just chill. Like, you've been in a position of authority for a long time. We need to also have them putting their money in their if their assets in a blind trust, so that when they're making decisions in Congress, they're not able to just lie in their own pockets or make decisions that line up with them. So it's going to have to be a whole overhaul of every single branch of government, the ethics in government. And we're going to need new laws. We're going to need to amend certain laws. And I'm afraid we're going to have to put some of this in the Constitution, because just codifying it doesn't mean they can't come back and find a way to repeal it. Or if it's just an executive, an executive act or some type of regulation within a department, the next administration can come in and pass it like that. So we need to make sure we codify things, and then eventually we need to amend the Constitution to have some of these things in it to protect the public.
Yeah, I'm really glad you mentioned the constitutional amendment, because there has been a growing movement, especially post Citizens United, to create a constitutional amendment to address things like lobbying. Citizens United specifically, a lot of people want to see that overturned, and what we're supposed to do as far as enforcement of ethics violations across the federal government system. And that has gained a lot of traction, it seems, within some circles on both the left and the right, but we're not bringing that to the forefront yet. And so I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I'm actually part of a group that's trying to get us to have a constitutional amendment to prevent things like Citizens United. So one of the other things I wanted to ask you about, how are we on time? When do you have to go? What's your hard, like, I got to get out of here? Okay.
I got like 10 minutes or so,
All right,
10
we'll
minutes.
do 10 minutes. If you have questions, I think you can drop them in the chat. I've never used the chat feature here before, but you can try to use it if you want. We're having a conversation again, if you've joined us late, with Elijah Manley, who is running for Florida's 20th Congressional District. He has had a very interesting run so far. At first, he was running against Sheila McCormick, who was ousted because of bribery or fraud, something like that. I'm not sure. Yeah, something like that. So she was ousted, and then it was the open race, which Elijah was like it was like done deal when he was running there. And then, of course, Florida did its shenanigans with redistricting, and he was changed districts. And then Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who is the former DNC chair, who lives in a different district, decided that she was going to run in Elijah's district because it's one of the only guaranteed blue seats that's anywhere near her, which I think to be incredibly insulting to the people who actually live in that district, to presume that a community you don't live in and never have. Elijah probably remembers this. I drew an opponent when I ran for Congress in 2022 who didn't live in the district during the primary. was openly collaborating with Ron DeSantis's people, and didn't live there. And I whooped her, so that was great, and I'm hoping Elijah does too. But
There needs to be a like, that needs to be part of a constitutional amendment, like, to run and they could, because right now you don't have to live in a district,
you just have to live
and
in the state.
you just have to live in a s that's ridiculous. Hey, we need to amend the Constitution. Even if you have to move, I get it, like, they draw the lines weird, and, like, if you buy a house or something in your homestead, it's hard to move, but, like, run where you live and rent a house. Like,
Yeah, be part of. You have to be part of the community that
right,
you're supposed to be representing. Like, isn't that? I have to ask people like this. Like, isn't that important to you?
right,
To
like,
know that you understand this community, that you're a part of this community, that you have their back and they have yours. That does that not matter to somebody like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who's like, "Oh, I'll just run in that district because I know it's gonna be blue." I mean, otherwise, why not
people don't know
have
what is there.
yeah,
Like,
why not have 30 districts in Florida that are made up entirely of 30 rich people from Miami? They don't have to live in the district, they just have to live in the state. You could literally elect 30, I think it's 29, maybe 30 now seats, um across the state that all live in one building in Miami. There's no rule against that. And I get during like redistricting years, I think that, that's a little different and more complicated. And I would hope that most states have a system set up that isn't as vindictive as some governors to specifically draw like a circle around somebody's house to put them, in the wrong area. But even if that happens, it's still you should have to be a part of the community that you're trying to represent. And Debbie has not been ever. And it's very, I think, inappropriate. And I say that as someone who, when I was raided at gunpoint without a warrant on Ron DeSantis's direct orders, she was one of the first people who came forward and demanded an investigation. She was one of the first people who publicly denounced it and called it evil and the worst kind of intimidation of whistleblowers she's seen in her career. And so she supported and continued to support me all those years, me and my family. But that doesn't mean that she is the candidate who should represent this community. You can be nice about something. I was kind of a hot item, so like most Democrats were on my side, and not be the right candidate. And it's not just the things we've discussed, like AI and climate change and money in politics. It's also Congress's role in designing and passing international laws or deciding international policy rather.
yeah.
And, there has been over the last few years a growing understanding and knowledge of some of the situations overseas that we're involved with and that we might be on the wrong side of. And I don't know how else to say that if you're on the wrong side of the genocide, there's not really any nuance to that or any way to make it sound vanilla. It's genocide. We have different states that are enabling genocide in Asia and in Africa. And we are enabling and funding it in, unfortunately, Palestine and a lot of the surrounding areas that have been attacked since then. And Wasserman Schultz is one of the most pro Israel Congress people that we've ever had that's ever been in Congress. And that is something that you've been unafraid to speak out on, and I appreciate that because a lot of people are too scared to say anything. But you're also not making your whole campaign about that. I think people who are disingenuous see that as a hot topic among progressives or leftists,
Yeah.
and they hone in on it because they think that it'll get more attention, and oftentimes it does. And then their campaign kind of becomes just about fighting APAC, which is only allowed to exist because of the other issues that you discussed, because of money in politics and all of these other issues. So I like that you were like, yes, this is wrong. Okay, let's move on and talk about the things that are going to affect Florida every single day of their life.
And I've got some pushback for it too. People are like, "Why are you talking about this every day?" And I'm like, "I talk about it a lot. I do, and even in the district a lot. But also I have to talk about affordability. I have to talk about healthcare, housing, and I don't want to make myself a single issue candidate because then it's easier for them to say, "Oh, look, he's just this, right?" And,
And that's what I like. It's like you're firm on your position, but that's not your campaign. Your campaign has been so focused. I would say I've seen the most content related to affordability online about helping the crisis because we're not first of all we're not even acknowledging the fact that we have an affordability crisis. which is insane to me. It's not being the media is not calling it that, it's like, "Oh, costs are rising." It's like, no.
Yeah.
We have rents now that are so, like, astronomically high. Like, I live in a three-bedroom in Silver Spring, Maryland now because I fled Florida, and it's $3,100 a month, and that is below average where I live. And I live a good bit outside of DC, so I'm not, like, super close, and my husband is a, bioscientist who has a great government job, and he makes over 6 figures, and we don't have any money at the end of the month, and so if you have 2 people with advanced degrees, who are scientists who are, employed and you still can't make it, then, people like my mom who don't have those degrees are on the verge of homelessness. And, it's not just rent, it's the policies that we have in place that allow places like Airbnb to or these private equity firms to buy up all the property and either turn it to a short-term rental or, resell it at higher costs, which means that the housing stock is basically taken off the market if it's too expensive,
Risk. Yeah.
or everything's turning into rentals, and rentals are never cheaper than buying, because you're paying somebody's mortgage and then some. So and getting to the point to be able to own a home is I mean, it's really homeownership for the longest time was what a defining trait of what made the middle class, and now most people under 40 do not own a house.
No.
And that is a very bad trend, and it's not because we're eating avocado toast. So, since I brought that
Yes.
up, I would ask you, what do you wanna do about, like, private equity firms and all these the housing stock just basically being turned into an unaffordable hellscape?
That has to be shut down. I do think we need to ban that, to be honest. There was a good bill that was bipartisan that passed through Congress that Trump refused to sign because it didn't have the SAVE Act attached to it. It was a really good bill. Unfortunately, it was like, 500 or more properties. I think it should be a lot lower than that. But the intention behind the law was good. So I think we need to expand that and bring that number down. But also for homeownership, like you hit the way you build wealth is through homeownership in many cases for a lot of people. That has been not accessible for so many people due to like historic racism and redlining, which still exists. Redlining still exists. They just do it in a different way. But I call for like at least $20,000 down payment assistance because you have people that can afford the mortgage. They just don't have the down payment money or they don't have the credit score. And we still have people who have the resources and we need to be able to give them the assets to buy the home. But this commodification of housing has been just to me, it's a big issue. Homes are made to live in, not to be used as, gambling tokens for the rich. And so I think that needs to stop. And I'm in complete favor of banning the private equity firms from buying up housing entirely. Complete ban on it. Republicans aren't going to like that from me, but I think that's the way to go. Homes are made to be lived in, and if you have houses just sitting around with no one living in them for years, you should be forced to pay some type of tax on that. And so I would propose some type of tax. I don't know if it's land value, whatever it may be, like an occupancy tax. Like, okay, if you own a property and no one's living in it for like a year, um, you know, and it's just sitting there, and you're just
No repairs being made, no work being done, and it's like a second or third or fifth property, and it's just
right.
sitting. Yeah.
You have to pay some fee on it, and I understand it's gonna be different if you have people with vacation homes or family homes, that's different, but, like, if you're
We're
just
talking
like
about big companies here. Like,
right,
I feel like it's not often emphasized. We're not talking about, oh, you inherited your dad's house and you're fixing it up before you rent it out because you already bought your home or you
yeah,
want to use it as like a place where you and your family get back together. We're not talking about that. We're talking about these companies who will buy a million homes and then jack up the price so much that nobody can afford them. And so they just sit.
explain it.
And to me, I know that's more of a local issue, but I will bring up like the lack of regulation and taxation on Airbnbs is insane. They're operating as hotels. They are operating as a hotel and they are not paying those hotel rates. And that is, I don't understand it. I don't understand if you're in the business of commodity renting property, why you're not paying the same tax rate as every other establishment that is doing that. Um, but that's more of like a local state issue. But Yeah, no, it's becoming a housing crisis, on top of the affordability crisis, and when housing goes up as much as it has, especially since COVID, and it's been a significant increase in, costs, that puts pressure on every other sector. Like, Trump's decisions have made food prices go up, gas prices go up, and
Um,
most
so
people, let's be honest about pre-COVID, um, a lot of us say we should get back to COVID, and that would be better than where we are now. But pre-COVID was not great. I mean, I think it was something like 40% of people didn't have enough money in their bank account to be able to afford, like, a basic car repair if their car breaks down. So we were not in a great place economically before COVID happened. And while at least stabilizing and getting back to that would be good, um, we don't also have to settle for that. We can do better. And that's why I love you, is because you're always like, "Yes, we can do the better thing. We don't have to just, like, do
you
the
don't have
bare
to, like,
minimum."
be mediocre. Like, it doesn't have to be
Yes.
mediocre as a country. We have all the money in the world, a limited amount of money. Like, we should use it to do good. Like,
To take care of our
that's
own people at least, like,
right.
I didn't mention it, but I know a lot of people are gonna ask, do you support universal healthcare?
Yes, I'm a Medicare for All guy. I think, like, it's embarrassing that we don't have Medicare for All. There's no argument that I can ever hear. Like, at this point, if anyone's making an argument against Medicare for All, it's just, like, laughable, against at least universal healthcare. Like, the argument that in a country as rich as ours, with all the resources we have, we can't guarantee some standard of healthcare for our people, like some minimum standard at least for people. Like, you go to other countries and like, oh wow, like you go to the doctor, you come out and it's like, oh wow, it cost me $25 in total. Like, I'm not going bankrupt. Like, oh wow, I don't have to pay like this premium and this $8,000 deductible before I can use my healthcare. That's like insane. Like, what are we rich? What are we the richest country in the world for? It's not freedom if you're poor and you can't afford to go to the doctor, and it's
Or
not
people
freedom
who
if you can't
are
afford to.
afraid to go to the doctor. There was the guy who there was a big story sometime last week about a guy who was impaled while hiking up some mountain in Colorado, and he was so terrified of the idea of having to pay the medevac fee that he climbed back down the whole mountain with this giant, like, thing sticking. It was straight through his body because the helicopter thing would have cost, like, 15 or $20,000. I mean, and I gotta say, in one hand, like, that's hard ass. That is some tough, good for you, man.
I would've took that I would've took it and I would've not paid it.
I would have just, like, laid down and been like, "Alright, this is it, I'm dead." But
I think you're probably, like, one of the only Dems that have said we need to cancel all the medical debt in the country.
yeah,
Like, people are afraid to say that. They're like, "Oh, wow, you wanna cancel that?" I'm like, "How many freaking bailouts have we given to the damn banks and to all the corporations when they fail?"
and the
They've
auto
been bailed out.
companies, everybody else. Yep.
We canceled their debt essentially, but we can't do it for regular people, like for, mom and pops and little children and regular working people, cancel their medical debt, but the medical companies, the healthcare insurance companies, all the big banks, time and time again, they get to get bailouts from the government, get their debt canceled, get payouts from American taxpayers, but we can't give people anything. That's laughable to me. And people like Debbie Wasserman Schultz, she is not someone that's forward thinking on this stuff. She is still stuck in the past. She doesn't recognize that these issues are important. And sometimes it's time to give it up. It's long career in Congress. At some point, you just have to just wrap it up and say, I'm not what's needed at this time, and I need more Democrats to do that.
Doesn't even live there. Okay, but sorry, that
She
I'm
doesn't even live there. She doesn't
yeah,
even go there.
I do. Every time that, like, she says something, because she will, and it's a manipulative thing I've seen white, especially women, do when they're running for office, where all the photos that she's taking and posting now are with somebody who's of color.
Yeah.
And to make it seem like she's part of, I don't know, but she thinks that all communities of color are exactly the same, apparently, but that's all she posts now. And I have started just posting the meme of "She doesn't even go here" from Mean Girls every time that
Yep.
I see something about. I do want to bring up something that I saw her post yesterday. And I was in the U.S. Senate all day for National Whistleblower Day. We had 4 different senators come speak, which was great, and I would love you, Elijah, to come be one of our speakers one year, because all of the other ones were like 85 or older. But we need young whistleblowers or whistleblower minded people to come support our movements. But She posted something and I believe was an endorsement of someone else by someone else that said, we need people who know we need to elect someone who knows how legislation works. We need someone to understand how laws work. And it was basically calling you ignorant.
Yeah.
And I commented under there. I tried to, but it didn't post because of stupid service. And I said, it's incredibly racist to accuse the young black man that you're running against when you don't even live in the district of being ignorant in this race. Like that is okay, yeah, Debbie, you've been in the house for 50 years or whatever, have you helped be part of progressive change for anything? Have you historically before now that you've decided that all these black people are your best friend, done anything for the black community? Because you've supported, or not you, sorry, Debbie has supported in the past, sending money to Israel over programs that would help people in Florida's black community and pick up the gap that's left behind from Ron DeSantis not doing anything like that at all. And I imagine you've dealt with a lot of that kind of
I've dealt with all
what
mixed of
mean
like
stuff.
yes, I mean, whether it's from Debbie's team or, the media, this idea that, oh, wow, this 27-year-old is just a kid. He doesn't know anything and he doesn't have experience is my favorite one. And I still don't understand what experience that she has that outweighs the experience of every other candidate running, including their lived experience, growing up in this community, going through the things I've went through. And to just say, oh, while I'm on the Appropriations Committee, I'm a senior member of Congress. They don't know anything. Me, this magical white woman from Weston knows everything. It's insulting to me. It's like, yes, you have a lot of knowledge, and that is knowledge we need, and that's why she should have ran in the district she lives in. But
Mhm.
I tell people, I'll put it I'll go toe to toe with anybody any day, including Debbie, about the things I know, about healthcare, about housing, about how we solve these issues, about the laws that need to be changed. Because I know my stuff and I'm running because I know the stuff. And no one is going to make me back down from that fight, including
Yeah,
Debbie.
I think that 5 years ago when we first met, I picked up that maybe it's something that happens to kids like us who were poor and homeless,
Yeah.
when we escape that
Yeah.
and we don't just abandon, the lessons that were learned and we see the system's failures from the inside, that we carry that with us. But I knew 5 years ago that you knew far more about how broken our system was, and you understood the complexities, of systemic issues better than almost every candidate that I've interviewed, including this cycle. Um, I'm not saying that Debbie's ignorant or useless, but she does have another option here. Her other option is to not run against you in a district she doesn't live. It's to mentor you, to help you build up your place, and the next generation of leaders instead of grabbing on to power and squeezing it as tight as you can, just because it's become a sort of expected comfort. And that, I mean, I really do. You're in it for the right reasons. I have zero doubt in that. I was so honored that you came. You stayed with me and watched my campaign for the last little bit of it.
That was fun.
um
I love that.
it was fun. It really was fun. It was crazy and fun. But I think my race was a little different because I knew there was no way I was gonna win the general. Um, but I wasn't there to do that. I was there to make a stand for a lot of other things.
Okay, but I mean, there's only a few people that I mean, not a few, but there's only less than 1% of Americans that know what it feels like to run for Congress. And yeah, two of us here. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's
Except for you're gonna win.
it's
You're gonna win it. That's the big difference is that you're gonna win it. I mean, I don't think I know many people more deserving who would make better leaders than those who, you know, get out and then
yeah,
come back to help. And a lot of us could just turn our backs on what we knew and what we grew up and the people that were around us or
right.
mistreated us and be like, you know what, screw them. I've got mine and I'm going to just spend my life enriching myself. And
Yeah.
you're not one of those, but I know you said you only had 10 minutes and we took 15. So I will let you do the wrap up. And go ahead and tell everybody again your name, what you're running for, some of the key election dates, and where they can find out more information or support you.
Yes, Elijah Manley here running in Florida 20, which is Broward County, Florida. And the election is 2.5 weeks away on August 18th. Early voting starts August 8th. You can vote by mail now. The last day to request a ballot if you live in a district is August 6th, and early voting ends August 16th. But we are in the last 18 days now, which means we need all the resources we can get. So if you can donate, chip in whatever you can. I don't have the 3 million that my opponent has. So every dollar will make a difference. But also we need some phone bankers. If you want a phone bank, if you live down here and you want to canvass, please sign up to do so on my website or hit me up in the DMs and we will make it happen.
What's your website?
www.elijahmanley.com.
Okay. So it was really simple. If you look up Elijah Manley, you'll find him. And do you have like virtual phone banking? Like, can
Yeah.
I
Yes.
help phone bank for you from Maryland?
Yes. So we have a Skill to Win link. And if you sign up on our website, we'll get that sent out to you.
All right. Well, lots of ways to help this incredible, talented, passionate young man and get him to Congress so he can actually start to fix things. And I encourage everyone to support him. Again, this is the only endorsement I have made or will be making during the primaries, and can't say enough about his leadership and what he brings to this. So, Elijah, as always, it was great to see you. And good luck.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, bye.